Chapter 14 At home in times of poor health. Contradictory Christian thought. As born-again children in the family of God, we would like to think that none of the diseases of Egypt would afflict us and that we should always prosper as did the children of Israel, whose shoes did not wear out for 40 years in the rigors of Sinai. There were no shoe repair businesses for the 2 million wanderers. There are the promises of Scripture like, "Ask, and it shall be given, and whatsoever ye shall ask in my name, that will I do," Matthew 7:7 and John 14:13. These promises seem clear, but the serious Bible student has to balance other verses that impose a condition, such as 1 John 5:14, "If we ask anything according to his will, he heareth us." Most promises are not a blank check for us to fill in arbitrarily according to our whims. God is a faithful Father who wants our best interests and His glory. A faithful father will not give his little son a butcher knife to play with even though the son very much wants it. In spite of our exalted position in Christ, as heirs of God and joint heirs with Jesus Christ, we are afflicted with the worst of diseases. Our shoes wear out and our autos break down and become worthless. I have often been asked what was the greatest blessing in my life, excluding salvation and a great wife. My answer has always been the heartbreak of Lebanon and sickness. Our brief exposure to the tragic Lebanese civil war shook us to our emotional roots. To see the sufferings of innocent civilians, caused by war, changed us forever. In my ministry up to that time, I do not remember that I was moved to tears while preaching, even though I am by nature a very caring person. After departing 215 Cast Your Bread, a Lebanon that was being ripped apart, the mere mention of Lebanon would bring tears to my eyes. Preaching was more passionate and often turned on this emotional tap of tears. My preaching became more effective and was accompanied by much more visible fruit. Up until the early to mid-70s, we both enjoyed good health. At that point Kathleen began to develop some serious bouts with allergies every spring that developed into a serious congestion. The doctor put her on strong antibiotics, but the condition still hung on. We finally figured out that it coincided with the 2-month period of the olive blossoms, and we lived in the middle of a sea of olive trees. During this time she continued to build congestion until it mimicked bronchial pneumonia. Each year this condition continued to worsen, and antibiotics were losing their effect. We put plastic over all windows and screen doors to slow the entry of the pollen and limited the opening of any outside door to the bare minimum of time. Finally, the doctor suggested the solution lay in either spending the time in an oxygen tent or traveling to a country free of olives. This problem put great stress on Kathleen, who was carrying on a teaching schedule with the girls besides homekeeper, wife and ministry involvement. Neither solution was easy to apply. Amazingly, once we left Lebanon, the issue disappeared. God knew the solution all along. My symptoms of extreme fatigue began spasmodically in Lebanon during the last 2 or 3 years of our residence there. Now in Australia they were intensifying. Some of the doctors were saying the extreme fatigue was due to low blood sugar. I found Kathleen praying and crying one day. She felt that I was losing stamina rapidly, so unlike my normal self. No real diagnosis or solution was found. In May of 1979 I was finding the burden of the work heavy with my limited strength to keep up with the challenges of discipling the new believers. I tried to visit those who did not come on Sunday evenings and basically give them the Sunday evening message in brief so that they would grow. Gradually, some of those believers began to attend all the services, which meant that I could feed them all at the same time during the church service. With a health problem looming, that development was an oasis in the desert. The Lord had not yet given an answer to my increasing health problem. The specialist said he was absolutely baffled. I was experiencing a pounding in the chest and generally upset condition, which could only be partially relieved by 216 at home in times of poor health eating something. The doctor first suggested that I eat something when I felt like this. I was also waking in the night and having to eat something before I could return to sleep. It had now advanced to the point that I had to eat almost every 60 to 90 minutes. In order to maintain visits, I had to carry little sandwiches to cater to the situation. The brethren were becoming aware of it and were coming out with some delicious snacks to keep me going. But I was at the point where my soul almost hated food. I could hardly bear to eat. I felt I was being pushed into a corner with no exit in sight. Anyway, I was very happy in God's will and was rejoicing in the work. In spite of this problem, we had never been more blessed. God was giving record attendances with many spiritual victories and souls coming to Christ. I had never seen such results in Arabic ministry. By November 1979 I was struggling more than ever to keep up with the ministry. In desperation for relief, I accepted a doctor's recommendation to go on a very restricted, rigid diet, and we would see if any benefit came from it. Kathleen was such a blessing. She kept looking, reading, searching for anything that might help me. She just did not give up or take no for an answer. Now she was working so much to fix this huge jar of slimy, hard to be thankful for drink every day, from juicing carrots, spinach, lettuce, celery, cucumbers, and who knows what else. I just closed my eyes, prayed while counting to 3 and then poured it down and hoped it didn't come back up. But wait, I didn't tell you about the dessert, ground up grain with goat's yogurt. The only pleasant thing about the diet was the rich seasoning of Kathleen's genuine love in taking all the time to fix the magic potion. I did appreciate that. She did have plenty of other things to do. Medical furlough 1980. This year was the time for furlough, but my present health conditions would not allow the extensive kind of traveling that visiting our supporting churches required. My lack of strength and the strict diets would not help either. So we communicated this matter to the churches, which had shown great understanding. As one pastor told me, "We want you to be able to serve in Australia, that is priority number 1, and not to visit us if you are not physically able to do both." So we were planning a 3-month medical furlough at the end of the year. The last 2 months had brought us to the breaking point where we felt something must be done about my health problem. My doctor's 217 cast your bread had insisted for months that I needed a complete rest from all responsibilities and especially preaching. It became harder and harder to cope. During this medical leave I would seek new medical advice and would have a complete rest from preaching and the stress of the work. We booked appointments in a special medical clinic in Kent, Washington, and a 1-month stay in a Dallas hospital ecology unit, the only one of its kind in the world at that time. My allergist recommended that I go to this ecology unit to check if there might be some food or environmental allergic reaction that was causing my extreme weakness, heart palpitations, headaches, difficulty in concentrating and remembering when the drops came. This could or could not be the reason, but we would be exploring those avenues. Almost every other medical avenue had been explored, only to find big question marks at the end. We were looking to the Lord for His direction. The Washington clinic had me swallow a capsule that was actually a miniature transmitter. Results of that test showed that elements of the stomach function were greatly deficient, and this meant that my stomach had little acid. Therefore, my body was not being nourished properly even though I was eating every hour or so and even in the middle of the night. Following those tests, I purchased some strong betaine hydrochloric acid pills and took them with dinner. Within 30 minutes I told Kathleen, "Something drastic is happening. I feel like I am a human again." From that time on, I could eat 3 times daily and feel nurtured, and the adverse symptoms were greatly diminished. The doctor explained that this was a secondary cause and that there might be a deeper problem of which he was not aware. The Dallas Ecology Unit tests began with a 5-day fast with only distilled water to drink that peeled off 4.5 kilos from my bony frame. That was followed by the slow introduction of different foods and relevant tests. The final results indicated that I was allergic to several foods. So I was put on a rotation diet where no safe food could be eaten more than 1 time every 4 days. The doctors strongly suspected that the high pollution of Sydney was another factor in my overall condition. Overall, the medical furlough was a real learning experience with several finds that would help me to cope with life and remain in the ministry. All of the doctors pointed out that those matters were probably not the primary cause but only secondary causes. However, any help was welcome and something for 218 at home in times of poor health which to praise the Lord. What a blessing not to have to eat all the time to hold off these overpowering symptoms. It would have been worth the entire trip to the States just for that one thing. I was still having a struggle with weakness and related symptoms, but they were bearable and manageable at the time. The little storms come and go, but thank God for His faithfulness and that He is never late to meet our need. The final diagnosis after a 10-year search, my physical problems that began back in Lebanon increased steadily until 1986. From 1980 on, I survived by taking 15 stomach acid tablets every day. Still, the other symptoms of weakness and total exhaustion persisted, which limited my strength for the ministry. Amazingly enough, however, God blessed the decreased effort I could put forth with increased results. Also, it motivated the brethren to work harder, which also resulted in gain to church outreach. It was so hard to understand why God would allow such a hindrance when He had given us such a wonderful opportunity for ministry in Australia among the Arabic people. The years in Lebanon had prepared us well. The ability to enter a home with a knowledge of their language and culture was an indescribable blessing. It gave us a beachhead of trust and friendship that greatly aided in our effectiveness in presenting the gospel. In Lebanon we worked under a cloud of suspicion, and many thought we had some ulterior motive. But in Australia we were able to bypass all that suspicion and be accepted as true friends in a country in which they were the foreigners and strangers. It seemed that we had left no medical solution or diet untried. Had the doctor offered hope by eating green grass 3 times daily, I would probably have been willing to try. From the beginning, we asked God to intervene, but there was no miraculous healing. We accepted that with thanks, believing that God had a better purpose for my malady. And He truly showed us benefits from enduring the condition with thanksgiving. All the problems opened up a dramatic, new dimension of ministry never before known to me. To God belongs all the credit. A visit to my eye specialist alarmed him. He insisted that I should have a CT scan immediately, as well as another test related to my limbs. He was also alarmed by the changes he saw in my eyes. With the test results in hand, he ruled out any possibility of a brain tumor. He believed the problem was definitely 219 cast your bread multiple sclerosis. He sent me to a neurologist for further confirmation. The neurologist began stumbling around to explain my situation. I told him, "Doctor, you don't have to do that. Just tell me in plain English what it is. I believe in God who is in control of my situation, so I can handle knowing the diagnosis." He said it was multiple sclerosis and that the first thing I should do was to leave my high-stress profession of pastoring that involved much working with people. I began to cry, "Doctor, the ministry is my life. I would rather be in the ministry and live a shorter life than to leave the ministry and live a longer life." He explained that he was just telling me what was the best for me. He said that because I had contracted the disease at an older age, it would not have the wide swings with times of remission. My MS would likely progress slowly but steadily, without remission whatsoever. He expected me to lose sight slowly over about 4 years, at which time I would have lost functional ability to read and to drive. He expected about the same result for mobility in my legs, which were also affected by the MS. He said there was really nothing that medical science could do for me, at least at that point in time. New Year's Eve 1986. Now that we knew the reason for these over 10 years of symptoms, I was ready to just put it behind us and not explain it to anybody, just forget it all. Kathleen objected, "Richard, you can't do that. These dear brethren are very worried about you, they have been praying for you. You have to explain to them what is going on." Inwardly I knew that she was right. Just to make sure I did something, she told a couple of friends in confidence, making sure that the word would get around. So I rose to the task on New Year's Eve 1986. After challenging them for the new year, I explained to them what had transpired. I told them I was putting my eyes on God's altar, they were not mine, they belonged to Him. Whatever sight He would allow me to retain, I would use it for Him. I also promised Him the same for my legs. I was learning, as Paul learned, "My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." Most gladly therefore will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. 2 Cor 12:9. The outpouring of love and support from these beloved brethren defied my imagination. We were overwhelmed how God drew us so close with an even 220 at home in times of poor health, stronger bond of unity. It would be easier to face the challenge with their love and support. In a short period of time, I began to have leg pain if I walked far, and standing in the pulpit for very long brought pain. I found it very difficult not to stand in the pulpit. I don't know exactly why, but my beloved and once introverted helpmeet said briskly, "Do you want to preach? Then, get you a chair, and sit down to preach." I decided that a chair would be a good thing. In fact, I quite came to enjoy it. A powerful lesson in thankfulness. I had committed the matter to the Lord and enjoyed victory, but times of struggle would revisit me. Why is this happening? What is the future going to be? And how will it affect my ministry that has been so fruitful? One day I went to the Multiple Sclerosis Society, they were so helpful, for some sessions on how to cope with progressive disabilities. I was having a bad day, and the future looked really bleak. I guess I was feeling sorry for myself. I got acquainted with a young man about 25 years of age who was already in a wheelchair, Unable to walk, this disease really knocked me off my feet, he said in a somber voice. It all happened so quickly and violently, and we had only been married for a year. My life is really in tatters. My wife was really devastated. One day she told me she didn't know that she was marrying a helpless cripple whom she would have to take care of for the rest of her life. She decided that she couldn't handle it, and she walked out and left me. I don't know what I'm going to do. It struck me like a knife to the heart. What a heartbreaking tragedy for this young man. But here I was, 55 years of age after a life of great blessing, a church full of loving, supportive brethren and a loving, faithful wife who would spare nothing for my care and comfort, and here I was with an unthankful, depressed spirit. O God, have mercy upon your unworthy servant. Forgive me for my unbelief and lack of thankfulness. It was a powerful lesson that haunts me to this day and helped me to keep focus. Also, sometimes when I was having a really bad day, I would go to the hospital and visit a few people in the wards. I generally came home with a revived, thankful spirit that I had my disease and not their diseases. The disease progressed precisely as the neurologist had predicted. By 1990 I had to stop driving. By that time MS had blinded one eye except for some outer 221 cast-your-bread peripheral vision and had taken about 75% of the vision of the other eye. I needed very large print to be able to read. Providentially, the advent of the personal computer came just when I needed it. It allowed me tremendous flexibility that I would not have had otherwise. Several years of more loss of sight followed, which I supposed was progressive destruction of the optic nerve by the MS. The loss of sight seemed to be in overdrive, and I wondered how long it would be before total blindness would set in. In later years macular degeneration kicked in and brought me to very limited vision, which I have now in 2022. I can only read individual words with strong magnification. Beyond that, I depend on the computer to read text. A dreaded second problem in the 1990s. Kathleen was going to the eye specialist and casually suggested I go with her and let the doctor see me at the same time, which I did. When he examined my eyes, I noticed that he was getting excited. I asked why. He said that I had another problem in addition to the first one. Oh, no. One problem is enough. I don't need any more. He explained that the second problem was a cataract that had developed during this time and that it was clouding my remaining sight to the point of near blindness. He said that this problem could be fixed easily by surgery, and he explained the procedure. Prior to going to the specialist that day, I had prepared a sermon for Christmas Day. I used an illustration of a man, who had been born blind, who went to Chicago for an operation that would give him sight. After the successful surgery, the man was returning home on the train. They were passing through the dreary slums of Chicago and the man would exclaim aloud, almost frightening the quiet passengers. "Wow, how beautiful!" A little later, "I can't believe this wonderful scenery. It's fantastic." Finally, one of the irritated passengers spoke up, "Sir, you keep interrupting our ride with your outbursts of foolishness. We are passing through some of the most depressing slums in the United States of America. May I ask you what is so wonderful and beautiful about it?" The man replied apologetically, "Sir, I do apologize for disturbing your quiet. But I have been blind all my life. After my successful surgery in Chicago, I just can't contain my joy. All the world looks so beautiful to me. I related this story to my dear doctor friend who never responded to my witness for Christ. Sometimes I wondered if he believed in God, but he was visibly moved by my witness that 222 at home in times of poor health day. When I preached that message 2 days later, I could not keep back the hot tears. After the message, one of the men told me to book for the second or third surgery of the day so that the surgeon could practice and get warmed up on someone else before he started with me. After all, I only had one eye and not a lot of that one. The specialist got a big laugh out of that and gave me the second slot for the morning cataract surgery. The eye operation went perfectly in the words of the doctor. I chose to take a local, and the hour they worked on my eye, I spent praying fervently for a pastor friend and his family who were going through a very difficult time of testing. It seemed the Lord gave me that particular burden for just that 1 hour, which completely occupied my mind and thoughts. So the hour passed rapidly, and I didn't have to stop the operation one time to move, scratch, reposition myself, sneeze, or anything else. Truly, God undertakes in the smallest things for His servants. The next day I took the bandages off, and it was like walking into a whole new world. Buildings now had windows and doors. I could recognize people from 2 or 3 meters instead of having to peer right in their faces to figure them out. It was like coming back to the land of the living. Though I could have avoided those 3 unpleasant years of losing sight had I known of the cataract problem, I still thank God for allowing me the great blessing of this unique experience. To lose something with trauma, give it up with a struggle and then have it graciously given back was, indeed, a precious, intimate experience of God's blessing that will accompany me to heaven itself, where all weakness, sickness, and lost abilities will be replaced with blessed perfection in His presence. Yes, I do now appreciate more than ever before the sight and mobility that God has left for me to enjoy and to use for Him. From the beginning of the MS journey, I had given up every piece of sight to the Lord, the faithful Creator, often with the agonizing struggle of a fearful spirit that wanted desperately to grasp tightly the status quo. I knew that sight lost through MS was gone for good, barring divine intervention. I often told the Lord my desire, but I had always asked for His divine will, which was to me more important than any fleshly desire. Blindness in the perfect will of God would be infinitely better than full sight away from His pleasure and plan. Though the regained sight was fantastic, probably the greater blessing was that the MS had not accelerated at all. In fact, it had gone into remission. The 223 Cast your bread Lord hath done great things for us, whereof we are glad. Psalms 126:3. The Lord's healing power stopped the progression of the disease, though it did not reverse the damage already inflicted by the MS. The patchy vision associated with the MS effects upon the optic nerve would remain in full. The inability to drive would remain, and the chronic fatigue and other symptoms would remain as well. Sitting to preach would remain. Mobility in the legs stabilized with no further loss, and exercise would strengthen that mobility. God was so good and gracious. Does God still heal? Definitely. But He did not heal me by restoring 2 new eyes and 2 new legs, but He gave sweet relief from added damage that was really no less miraculous. Still, I recently had a lecture from a man that said if I would only exercise faith, I suppose like he does, I could have complete healing since he said it was God's will. Such friends keep us humble. And I am exceedingly thankful that we don't have to live under the guilt of an unbiblical expectation that God never promised to fulfill. Kathleen's battle with Alzheimer's disease. A midnight warning call in 1997. In 1997 we woke to find Kathleen paralyzed on her left side. It lasted for about 30 minutes. She spent 5 days in the hospital doing tests, but no cause was found. She never had a reoccurrence of the TIA mini stroke, and the doctors were never able to find the cause of her other symptoms of a fuzzy head at times when a numbness came to the base of her brain and caused a noticeable loss of memory until it passed. As well, she had times when she experienced a press-ed feeling in the chest that was depressing. Even with all of these substantial issues, this amazing lady managed to keep the home running smoothly and maintained her full-time job of helping me in all that I was trying to do. Not only did she do all these things for me but also many things for the grandchildren who lived next door to us. She was a constant source of inspiration to me. Her determination was always a blessing to observe and a source of strength to me. What a blessing to be married happily to a lady who shares completely in the vision and burden of the ministry. Sometimes when some ugly behavior of some saint of God occurred and I would be talking in jest to let off steam, expressing my disgust and possible 224 at home in times of poor health ways of getting back at that person, she would firmly say, "No, never. That is not the Richard Hester whom I know." So I would meekly crawl back to being the Richard Hester whom she knew. What began with a numbness at the base of the brain, foggy feeling and erratic memory continued to worsen. When our whole family was in Lebanon in 2011, she had a bad day. First, was circular questions and then later not recognizing people she knew well. The next morning she was back to her usual self. However, these difficulties continued, and she was later diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Soon after that she lost her driver's license. She had been my driver for 23 years. When Kathleen left with our daughter to turn the driver's license into the Road Traffic Authority, I knelt down alone and wept uncontrollably for at least 30 minutes. I felt we had lost a piece of our being, something very important and valuable. I cried because my heart ached for Kathleen to have to go through this. She never accepted that she was not able to drive. Thankfully, her license was taken before she had an accident. I cried because I couldn't forget that her card and ability to drive me around those past 23 years had enabled my ministry after I lost my ability to drive. The little piece of cardboard was taken and a photo ID issued in its place. 2 days after Christmas in 2016, Kathleen slumped back in her chair at the breakfast table. She looked like death, and I thought she was gone. The episode probably lasted about 10 seconds, and after 3 more episodes, the doctors realized her heart was stopping. Before long, she was in surgery for a pacemaker. God had a cardiologist friend of the family working at the hospital who took over to summon a surgeon friend to come in from his holiday to perform the surgery. Since it was a time of holidays, without this intervention, we would have waited about a week for a surgeon to come. The Lord was looking after His servant. When God takes something valuable, He is still doing something special in our lives. Kathleen's memory was progressively failing. She often did not recognize members of our church that she had known from decades, some even from our days in Lebanon. However, she had an uncanny ability to spot visitors. She would engage these visitors in conversation, then come tug on me, saying, "Richard, you need to come meet these visitors. She was almost always right. These new faces, in a sea of strange faces to her, were visitors. 225 Cast your bread. God has abundantly provided for our needs. Our church set up a roster for people to take us to church and back. Women from aged care look after us, cooking, cleaning, taking us shopping. They are a huge blessing to us. Our daughter Shirlene still lives next door and takes us to doctors, dentists and many important appointments. Our daughter Melody lives in Minnesota but comes during her summer break from teaching to provide respite care. Knowledge of who we are is generally gone, but at times she clearly knows us. However, thank God, she has such a sweet, peaceful spirit. Amazingly, she asks everyone where they were born because she is still searching for Arabic-speaking people. A humorous incident happened with this amazing lady when she was in the hospital for the pacemaker. None of the nurses or staff who came to her room were of Arab background. So she asked if anyone around there was of Middle Eastern background. When the nurse told her she didn't know, Kathleen quickly replied, "You just tell me their names, and I'll tell you if they are Middle Eastern." She has an unfeigned love for them, and it is still coming through. While she can no longer read much, in Arabic or English, she occasionally still speaks Arabic, usually when she wants to protest what she is being asked to do. Further, she is not at all bothered when the person she is talking about in Arabic turns to her and speaks in Arabic. She always is thrilled to find an Arabic-speaking person. Humorous anatomy people generally don't relish listening to the long descriptions of the aches and pains of others, especially of old people. So why don't we conclude this chapter on a light note? In 2016 I was facing surgery for my second cochlear implant. I was asked if I would like to have the cochlear implant surgery with a local anesthetic, which had become an option since my first implant. I thought it was a common procedure and quickly agreed, wanting to avoid any negative side effects of anesthesia. During the surgery, the surgeon kept asking if I had any pain. At one point I said, "Yes, I do." The anesthesiologist immediately gave me more. The surgeon was perplexed the next time he asked, when I said I still had pain. So he asked me where the pain was. I said, "It is in my foot." Apparently, I was having a cramp in my foot. 226 At home in times of poor health. On the follow-up visit to the surgeon, he told me that I was Australia's first to have the surgery with a local anesthetic and that I was number 13 in the world. I know that you will be proud to know that I was number 1 in the world to have cochlear implant surgery on my head and to feel the pain in my foot. This story got around and reached Dr. Philip Graham, an Australian doctor now in his 90s, who developed the first version of a cochlear implant that worked successfully on a patient. So maybe it's worth listening sympathetically to the physical complaints of others, since you may someday feel a lot of pain in strange places like the foot. Not unusual and not unique. I would never want to create any impression that our experiences or maladies measure up to the level of others. Our few experiences at the beginning of the Lebanese Civil War are no more than one drop of water in a bucket compared to so many Lebanese who suffered so much during those 16 years, plus all that has taken place to this present hour. Multiple sclerosis, and other our limitations, are shared by many, and many more are worse off. So we don't feel we are in a special class with our God-allowed maladies. Conversely, the message I sincerely wish to convey to hearts is how we can respond, resulting in great blessing, and how God can use these disruptions to our lives and health for His glory and for great good to others. No, we haven't enjoyed them. When I was so fatigued I could hardly move, I didn't say, "Please, God, give me still more of it." But I did beg God for mercy and strength somehow to do what I felt burdened by Him to do. And many times He did respond or intervene in ways that I cannot, in good conscience, deny or ignore. I simply want to encourage hope, ignite faith and harden resolve to continue in good works, knowing that your suffering, dashed hopes, reverses and faith are never in vain. He can and does bring beauty out of ashes, blessing out of tragedy and eternal results out of disappointed labor. Now unto Him that is able to keep you from falling, and to present you faultless before the presence of His glory with exceeding joy, to the only wise God our Saviour, be glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and ever. Amen. Jude 24-25. 227.